So, if you don't want to sit through the entirety of the 2.5 hour stream I did, where I went through the entirety of the Putin Tucker Carlson interview because you're a sane person and you can't deal with that, then I'm going to try to give you my overall thoughts. Now, this is my thoughts on it as an interview. Was it interesting? Was it engaging? Could I follow it? Were the questions good? This is ideology aside. This could be Cenk Uygur interviewing AOC. This could be Tucker Carlson interviewing Putin. This is just how I thought about it, generally speaking. Now, before we get into my opinion, I'm just going to say I suspect, and I don't like to pathologize people or accuse them of false consciousness, but I suspect a lot of people are going to rally the Reagans around Tucker. And regardless of how they probably actually felt this was, they're going to promote it. They're going to say it's the best interview ever and that it's awesome. And I get it. I really get it. And I'm sympathetic to the desire to do that because the sheer amount of like salt and insanity and breakdown and just people crying about Tucker going and having a 2 hour conversation with a Russian politician is fascinating. And I get why you want to say things that irritate these people because most of them are the scum of the earth and they're just insufferable, and seeing them rage I think predisposes you towards that. So I could be right, I could be wrong, but that would be my guess. Now, for me myself, and I think it was a mess. I don't think it was a very good interview. Let's just kind of maybe take a step back. So the format of the interview, for those of you who haven't seen it, is basically Tucker has like a list of questions, I think, that he just asks. Largely, he just had like a list he needed to get through. And Putin is like not going to do that for an interview. Now, I watch the Duran pretty much every day and kind of their associated channels, and they will frequently talk about Putin's press conferences. They'll talk about interviews. Putin likes to do interviews. He likes to do like 4 hour press conferences. He likes to do really long interviews. And he has a tendency during these to just go on big speeches. Putin is a history nerd, and I think if you watch this, you'll very quickly see that he's very very knowledgeable about Russian history. From my understanding, he's written some historical essays. I don't know how good they are, but he is very very much into Russian history. And whenever he talks about something, he often will go on like a big explanation about where this fits into the historical context. So Tucker starts off by like asking him a question, and then the next 20 minutes are Putin just going through the foundation of Russia, how Ukraine was founded, and basically, like it ultimately does make sense. He's trying to basically argue that Ukrainian statehood is artificial, and once again, you can think whatever you want about that. And it did kind of ultimately make sense, but it was just very long, rambling, and it really doesn't fit like what Tucker's style is. If that makes sense, it's more like the gotcha, the like the building the rapport thing, the like dealing with millennials or other people with quirky personalities. Tucker is just completely like it's just awkward. This is not like the kind of interview he's good at. I don't know if like he did no research going into this because like I said, from my understanding, most of Putin's interviews are like this, and he just goes on and on and on about stuff. He had like some documents there that he gave Tucker. It wasn't even like directly relevant to anything. It was like the letter that was written to the Tsar of Russia from the people of Kiev asking for protection from the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth or something. And he just had that letter there. And basically, like how it went for the first half was Putin was giving his Russian history lecture, and then Tucker would periodically interrupt, and Putin would get pissed off at him for interrupting. And he would just kind of throw stuff out there, and then Putin wouldn't answer the question. And that was the first basically hour of the interview. Once we got to the second hour and Putin was done kind of giving his lecture, we started getting into some actual questions. And that's when it really got bad. Because at least there was kind of an interesting narrative, like to go through. Like in the first half, Putin was talking about some of the behind the scenes of diplomacy with various Western leaders, and I thought that was pretty interesting. And he was kind of, you were getting a bit more of the Russian perspective on stuff. Like he said, he felt the reason why the U.S. didn't reach out to Russia in the aftermath of the Cold War and invite them into NATO or the EU or the North Atlantic system is that Russia is a great power, even if it was not on its best terms at that time. So if Russia was to come in to NATO or come into the Atlantic system, it would not just be America and friends anymore. They would have another large country with a strong identity and a strong sense of self-interest that they would have to go up against. And that was ultimately the reason why they didn't choose to pursue integration with Russia. So I thought that was a very interesting point. I had never really thought of that before, but it did make a lot of sense to me. So that was interesting. Some of the other stuff he talked about, the conversations with people behind the scenes, was interesting. But I kind of felt like Tucker didn't really hadn't done his homework. Like Putin was going through all this stuff and he was just kind of lost for a lot of it. Now, as I said, I follow this stuff very closely because I find it interesting. I like watching this kind of historical event unfold in real time. And a lot of the stuff Putin was saying that I feel like Tucker was kind of unaware of, or just wasn't sure how to react to, is stuff that's been said fairly frequently. And so, the whole thing was just this awkward, Tucker trying to do his normal interview style and asking, the big question, and then Putin would just ignore him and go back to his lecture. And it was just very uncomfortable. There was a couple times when Putin just laid the smack down on him. He got mad because Tucker kept asking him questions. He's like, I thought you said we were going to have a serious conversation. And then later on, he said, you couldn't get into the CIA because you're not a serious person, and just kind of zinged him. And people were saying, oh, this is going to be Tucker, just sucking Putin off, and Tucker, saying, how great he was. And it was just a nothing borscht. Would that be the term? There's nothing burger, there's nothing poutine, there's nothing borscht. It's a borscht that has no beets in it. It has no beet, it has no bacon in it. It's a nothing borscht, which is kind of how I just think of it, it personally. So I think the whole thing was just like a mess. It was kind of a waste of everybody's time. I think there was an opportunity here to maybe try to engage with some of Putin's ideas, talk about, I don't know, nationalism or identity or religion or something. And instead, it was just kind of this monotonous history lesson. And to be fair, Putin knows his stuff. He has receipts. He could quote dates, he could quote all kinds of stuff. He does have a very good memory. But it's just, if he was, I don't know if who this interview is for. It's not for I don't think it's for normie Republicans. Is it for people like us? I don't really get it. But I guess you could say at least it wasn't a propaganda piece. It was just kind of a nothing borscht. So once again, maybe I'm just completely off on this one. Maybe everyone's going to disagree with me, but I just thought it was kind of boring. It didn't really. There were some interesting parts to it, but most of it was about halfway through. I just started skipping through it, and people were asking me to skip through it because it was just kind of slow. And I don't know. You can say that I just I don't have patience. I'm a millennial or whatever. If this was just Putin giving a history lecture, I could listen to that. That's not really an issue. The issue is I was expecting an interview. I was expecting it to not be a Fox News, no spin zone or whatever you want to call it interview. But I was expecting a little more back and forth than what I got. And it's just it's kind of meh. I don't really think it's a win or a loss for Putin. I guess you could say it's a W for Tucker because he got the interview. but I don't really think he had a ton to show for it. So maybe everyone's going to disagree. Maybe just like for me personally, because I've heard all this stuff it before, it doesn't come across as shocking to me. But Putin had his chance to make his case for good or ill. He made it, and we'll see how people react to this. I don't have much else to say. God bless everybody. Have a good evening.